Welcome to Take a Seat, the Ashfords Trainee podcast. I'm your host, Bella. Join me as I speak to members from each department at Ashfords, exploring trainee life within various seats. Good morning. Welcome to episode 6 of our Ashfords Take a Seat trainee podcast. Today we are joined by two partners from our Trust and Estates department. So Kerry, Emma, if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Hi, Bella. So I'm Kerry. I head up our Trust and Estates team. And this is the lovely Emma.
Hi, I'm really very new to Ashfords. I think I've been here all of a month.
I know, like I said earlier, we've thrown you in the deep end here, having you come on.
No, I'm delighted to be here.
Exactly. No, but it's great. It'll be really great to get your kind of perspective of, I guess, joining Ashfords fresh.
Yeah.
So that's brilliant. Why don't we start by, I guess, speaking a bit about Trust and Estates. So I guess the kind of work that you do on the day-to-day and the team sort of in general.
So the department and how the department's structured is probably a good place to start, I think. So I always kind of refer to T&E department as a kind of collection of mini businesses all under one umbrella. So we've got what I refer to as our non-contentious team, and we've got the contentious team. Obviously, Emma can talk to you in much more detail and far more eloquently about our non-con side, but just as a kind of, very top level overview. So we have our partners and lawyers who advise on they're advising high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals on their tax, estate, lifetime planning. What are they going to do with their wealth, both during their lifetime and also what might they want to happen to their wealth after they've passed away. Also within that grouping, we've got a dedicated trust administration team. So we administer a lot of trusts where we're acting as the professional trustees, but we also will deal with the administration for external trustees as well. So it's quite a unique offering to have under the same umbrella in one department. We've also got, again, on the non-contentious side, we've got a court of protection team who this team are looking after people when they don't have capacity to look after their affairs themselves. So we act as deputies for people who have lost capacity, often managing their property and financial affairs, typically, as well as acting as attorneys as well, which is just a slightly different way of managing affairs after somebody's lost capacity. And then over on the contentious side, which is an area I'm much more comfortable with because that is my specialism. I kind of often the dark side, if you like. And so here we are dealing with any dispute about somebody's estate after they've passed away. So people might be disputing the validity of a will. They might be disgruntled because they've been left out of a will and it's all been left to some distant relative that they feel very aggrieved about. We also
Or the neighbour.
There's always a neighbour. There's always a neighbour.
There's always a neighbour.
Or a 25th cousin removed, So disputes after people have passed away, but also we deal with trust disputes as well. So where these family trusts have been created, invariably sometimes there can be issues with those, and so we will advise the trustees or indeed the beneficiaries of those trusts. But I think what's quite unique about Ashford's T&E department actually is that we have both the contentious and the non-contentious under the same roof. And although they are very different disciplines, and I absolutely would not try and draft somebody's will, or give any tax advice for that matter, I've been in other places where it's not structured in that way. And I think for me as a contentious lawyer, having my non-con colleagues and being able to say, okay, I think I'm getting to this settlement now. I've got this tax issue. Can we just talk it through? How might this play out from a tax perspective? Having them there, having them on hand. Only recently I had one of the partners I brought him into a mediation because we needed some advice, and that's really unique. And I think it works really well. And hopefully, from your side of things, we can add some value.
It definitely does, because I think that part of our role, particularly in non-contentious, is problem solving and helping people get to the objectives of where they want to get to. And one of the roadblocks there is what everybody else will do after you've died, after you've lost capacity. And if we can be talking to our contentious colleagues to work out ways where we can help avoid some of these problems, I think that's so valuable to our clients, and it's a really important thing to do. So yeah, as Kerry said, having everybody under one team, I think it's a great thing.
Perfect. And Emma, obviously, you mentioned you are quite new
Yes,
to the firm.
I am.
So tell us a bit about sort of your day-to-day role and what it is that you do.
Yep. I'm still working it out a little bit, being so new in. But I mean, there's some fabulous, cases and clients and things like that I'm getting to grips with taking over from somebody who's retiring, which is a real shame for the firm. So I'm sort of getting to grips with that and working very closely actually with one of the trainees who I look after, who's doing a great job, and advising people on inheritance tax planning, capital gains tax, looking at things that other lawyers have put in place sometimes and sort of working backwards and sort of checking that it all works okay, helping people that own and run businesses to sort out succession planning. So that might be from a tax perspective, but also from a who is going to take this business over? Are the next generation ready? How do we prepare them?
Yeah.
So it's a really varied role. And I mean, I often joke that part of my role is also part counsellor because I feel like I spend an awful lot of time talking to people about all sorts of things that aren't actually of a legal nature, but they're so important. And if we don't understand the dynamics and what's going on behind the scenes, it does look like we're quite nosy sometimes, but it is important so that we can get it right for them.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like trust and estates is one of those departments that my ears always kind of perk up when we speak about because the work seems so, I guess from somebody who obviously I don't have a legal background, it's so interesting to hear about the things that you sort of do because I guess it's relatable to some extent. You can sort of picture it because it's so real life based as opposed to something like commercial work.
And I mean, one of the things that probably attracted me to this area, and I wonder if it was for you, is the deepest, darkest secrets that we find out. You get so involved in the granular detail of people's lives, the secret families and all sorts of things that come out of the woodwork. And we're the client's trusted advisor. We're the people that they can tell this stuff to confidentially, and we can help them work out how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get such, I think in trust and estates, you're in such a privileged position, actually, both on the contentious and non-contentious side. On the contentious side, people are coming to you often at their lowest ebb. And, they don't quite know which way to turn. It's obviously slightly different when you're on the contentious side, but people have to feel like they can be vulnerable because it's not just for you guys, it's not just a question of looking at, okay, well, what assets are there and how might I, structure those efficiently. It's actually letting them feel confident and capable of being vulnerable with you to share that, oh, well, actually, my marriage might not be in the greatest of state, or actually I'm worried about my children's marriage. And, because all of that will then have a bearing on the advice you give. So being able to kind of draw out that from individual clients is a real privilege, actually. I think the other point of trust and estates is that we also touch on so many other different departments as well. Because often our clients have got a real mix of asset portfolios. So they may, by getting under the skin and talking to them about what's going on in their lives and what their plans are for the future, it may be that they're thinking about selling and exiting that business in due course. And so it gives us an opportunity then to be working with our corporate commercial colleagues about how best to advise and look after this clients. It's not just, trust and estates isn't just a transaction, it's about looking after the individuals as a whole.
And for their life often as well, isn't it? It's all the way. And then till after they've died and sorting out estates afterwards, it's the whole picture.
Yeah. And I think as well from the kind of trainee perspective, it's an interesting seat to go into if you don't kind of have any, I guess, prior experience with it, because you're also having to deal with that other level of emotional intelligence, like you said too. If you are going to be in that position to be sort of trusted at that level, it's a lot to kind of learn how to cope with. So in terms of trust and estates and the trainee program, what are some of the trainees' sort of regular tasks when it comes to the contentious and non-contentious side of things?
So we do keep the training separate for our, as you know, for our trainees. So we will have trainees going to non-con, and they will be looking at just the non-con side of things, and likewise with the contentious. So, probably, do you want to talk a bit about what they might do in the contentious?
Yeah, sure. So,
non-contentious, rather. I mean,
oh yeah,
like.
I agree, didn't I? So maybe I should. So, in non-contentious, the trainees, my trainee gets really involved with my day-to-day. So, if I'm having a client call or a client meeting, he's there, and I encourage him to get involved, to ask questions. I think it's really good to. Maybe he might not ask during the client meeting, sorry, what's the point in this? What's the technical point you're worried about? But ask me afterwards, because that's how you learn and develop. So he's really involved at a really sort of granular level of what I'm doing. And last week, actually, we had a call with a client where we were explaining the terms of a will that we had just drafted for her, and she wanted to sort of go through it all. And I said to my trainee, do you want to take it? I'll come and sit with you. You take the call, do the reading. We'll chat it through beforehand. I'll sit with you, so you're not sort of doing it by yourself, but you do it. And it was a really good experience for him. And I think it's about equipping people so that when they qualify, they're actually ready to be a solicitor, rather than qualifying and then thinking, how do I do the day job? What is the day job?
Yeah, that's an amazing opportunity as well, because I think it's something that we speak about quite often is that trainee experience is something that you're not necessarily going to find in every single firm. Being able to go and kind of handle a situation like that on his own is a brilliant opportunity.
I think that's something, as I say, I've only been here a short time, but it does seem to me that there is real autonomy given to trainees here. They are encouraged to get involved and to be as involved as they feel comfortable with being, obviously under supervision. But they really are given access to clients to sort of start developing their skills and working out the lawyer they want to be when they qualify, which is a really good experience for them.
Yeah. And on the contentious, look, I'm doing it now.
The same thing, aren't we now? Similarly, we try and give our trainees on the contentious side as much autonomy as we possibly can as well. And I think part of this also comes back to we recruit to retain our trainees, as you know, and so we shouldn't be using trainees to fulfill short-term resourcing gap. As Emma said, we're showing, as much as trainees are getting experience in T&E, I always think we're trying to show our best selves as well, because ultimately my recruitment strategy for Trust and Estates is to recruit from our internal trainee population and grow those people so that they can be if they want to be, they can be the future partners of the department. So that's very much fed into how we look after our trainees across the whole department. In terms of the kind of work that trainees would be getting involved in from a contentious perspective, they would be attending client meetings. They would be getting stuck in with drafting letters of advice, first draft letters of advice to clients. Obviously, we're in a contentious seat, so as much exposure to trying to get to court as possibly as we can possibly give them is great. Unfortunately, we don't quite go to court as much as we used to anymore. A lot of our cases are settled via mediation, but again, that's still a really good way for trainees to get exposure to how the case might play out if they don't settle. So they will often come along and attend those just to get some extra experience, really. But it's really getting stuck into the cases, I think, is a key part of the role. They might be involved in instructing barristers to advise or to attend hearings or to attend mediations. So they get to review the case and really think about the strategy and the next steps as part and parcel of those tasks that they're doing.
When it comes to that kind of, just going back to speaking about this being a trusted advisor, because I just find that really interesting. And so you've got a brand new trainee sort of in your department, and maybe a situation like that comes up where you are kind of in that position. How do you go about ensuring that a trainee, I guess, is well equipped to be in that position, or maybe to have that conversation, or is that not something that happens at trainee level?
I'd like to think that our partners and our senior lawyers who are supervising our trainees are really approachable and also haven't forgotten what it's like to be a trainee as well, which I think is really important. Yeah. And so in advance of a situation that, they may anticipate is going to be difficult, both, for the client and actually maybe those that are attending that meeting for the first time and hearing those things. I'm thinking particularly, and again, probably more your side than mine, but, if you're going to a meeting where somebody's grieving and they've just lost a relative, for a new trainee fresh into the department, whether that's because that person's in a contentious situation or non, that can be quite difficult. And, that the trainee may not have actually experienced death or somebody who's grieving. So we would sit down with the trainee in advance and just talk through that and give the trainee the time and space to ask any questions. Kind of always say there's no such thing as a stupid question or ultimately that we want to create an environment where our trainees thrive and feel comfortable asking stuff, really.
Yeah. And we probably as well, depending on the situation, would have a follow-up with them, once the meeting's over, sit down with them and say, what did you think? How did you find that? Do you have any questions about what we spoke about? I think the next steps are this. Do you want to, go away and have a go at that? And it's all about communication. And as Kerry's saying, encouraging people to ask questions and not feel self-conscious when they ask a question, because we've been there and we understand. And that's how they're going to get the most out of it, is by asking questions, really.
I think we try and role model as well within the departments, so I will ask, questions out loud and say, actually, I'm not quite sure about what I'm doing with this. And, and I know you all do the same. And I think so they can see that, I do not have all the answers, far from it. And actually, some of the best ideas come from the more junior members of my team. And that's how I want it to be.
Yeah. And the idea that you will never know all of the answers. It took me quite a long time to come to terms with that, but I will never know all of the answers. But that is also what makes my job interesting, because I'm still continually learning and the laws keep changing and tax regimes, and it's always evolving. And that's what makes it interesting.
I think that underpins exactly what you said so much about why we've kind of built this culture of partner approachability. And that obviously comes from those conversations and being able to stand up and admit that, you're not going to know everything, and probably feels so reassuring for the trainees as well to kind of come into an environment like that. So that's great. We've covered a little bit about how the sort of T&E department as a whole works and being split up slightly. How would you sort of describe the environment of the Trusts and Estates department? Because you are spread out.
Yes, we are. It's obviously the best. At the end. No, we are spread out, and we do have trainees in different locations. So obviously, as Emma said, she's got a trainee in London. We have trainees in our Bristol office, as well as trainees in Exeter. And I think actually a good example is your trainee who's new to Trust and Estates, hasn't had any experience doing that before. And obviously the London team is a small team at the moment. It's growing rapidly, but it is a small team at the moment. And so maybe you can talk a bit about how you've tried to connect up your trainee with others in other offices so that it feels cohesive.
So there's a monthly training session for the non-contentious team, and we are getting very involved with that, making sure we're going and joining the calls afterwards to talk about everything, so that we're all, we might be in different cities, but virtually we're all together. And we use Teams a lot to sort of be communicating with people. I mean, Teams is fantastic, isn't it? To be able to, send someone a quick message or to have a quick call with them. And I think if you can establish those sorts of relationships, it doesn't really matter that you're spread across England. That's okay, as long as you do talk to people, and it's just encouraging that. And I can say, as somebody who is new in, that I found everybody really approachable, and people are calling me and saying, hi, haven't met you yet, and good to meet you, and I'm coming to London, will you be there this day? And it's been really welcoming, and I think that's a really good sign, actually, because communication is something that I think is probably quite strong at Ashfords, it seems to me.
Brilliant.
We try. We also don't take ourselves too seriously. No. Our last away day involved duck herding.
I heard. I did. We'll need to catch up about that after this. I'm intrigued.
Maybe tells you a little bit about the atmosphere, clearly.
Perfect. Let's sort of switch and I guess focus a bit on the two of you and your sort of roots into law and how you got to be where you are today.
Okay. I think I always knew, or from quite a young age, knew that I wanted to be a solicitor. My parents said to me, apparently I was quite argumentative as a child. It's shocking, I know, but Apparently, I was always saying things like, when you'd go in a shop and your parents say, "Don't touch that," and then they'd catch me touching things. And I'd say, "I'm not touching, I'm looking with my hands." And they said that I was always destined to be a lawyer because of such things. So I did actually read law. And then I went on and I did it was LPC at the time, which no longer a thing, I don't think.
No.
And I spread that. I did that sort of 1 day a week over 2 years whilst doing a training contract. Worked in Kent regional firms, lots of sort of aristocracy and landed estates, that kind of thing. And then found myself in one of the bigger London offices for a big private client firm. Headed up a probate team there and now found myself here. All very strategic.
As it always is.
So, yeah, similar to Emma, really. I think I, from a pretty young age, wanted to be a lawyer and consequently at school then did lots of work experience. I was a prolific work experience person and built some really good relationships with some smaller firms in the town that I was living in. Who kept taking me back summer after summer, and decided then I was going to go. I did A-level law. Thought actually this is really quite interesting, and so went on to university and did law. And then I was really lucky that in my second year of my degree, the firm that I kept going back to for work experience said, "Do you want a training contract?" And I said, "Oh yes, please. That would be great." So I did my training with them. Then I moved actually to a larger regional firm on qualification because I knew pretty quickly into my training contract that I wanted to be a litigator. Did not want to do the transactional side of things at all. Litigation was really where my heart was at. I loved it. So, and there wasn't a role in the litigation department at the time. So I moved on qualification. And then, when I originally qualified, I qualified doing commercial litigation, which I think is quite common.
Did you?
Yes, it's quite common, I think, for a lot of private client litigators you don't necessarily go straight from A to B. Right. And Comlit was really, really broad. And it was purely actually by accident that I ended up doing private client litigation. An opportunity came up within the team and they needed somebody to step in. And being the kind of confident litigator, I was like, yes, of course, I can do that. Why not? But I actually loved it. And I loved having a niche. And I loved the clients. I loved the opportunity it gave me and didn't look back.
That's really interesting because I get that question sometimes of on qualification, is it, when you qualify into a department, is that it? Yeah. Is there ever any chance of kind of doing a sidestep and moving into something different? So that's a great example of kind of finding your way into your niche. And
I, as you know, was training principal for quite a long time and often had that conversation because you can see when you're talking to trainees when they're coming up to qualification, this sort of weight of pressure that they feel about getting this decision right and thinking it's got to be the right decision. And if I don't get it right now, I'm going to potentially ruin the rest of my life. And I often say to them, if you talk to a lot of partners in the business, very few of them actually start doing what they originally qualified to do. Whether that's because they've developed more of a niche within the area that they're working in, or actually whether they've taken a bit of a complete sidestep, really. That's okay. So kind of just take the pressure off yourselves a little bit. It's sometimes life takes you down a path that you weren't expecting, but being a trainee is about collecting the tools to be a good lawyer. It's not necessarily about becoming the best private client lawyer or the best commercial property lawyer as a trainee. It's the tools that you're building to be a good solicitor once you qualify that I think are important.
And we speak about that a lot as well, don't we? Of maybe if you get a seat that you're not necessarily over the moon to sort of be involved with, but the skills that you pick up from that then you can take forward.
Sometimes it surprises you. The number of trainees who didn't want to do a particular seat and then said, I want to qualify there.
Every time.
That was brilliant.
It's so
common. You don't know. You really don't.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity as well, what sort of seats did you do in your training contract?
So I did mainly litigation seats, really. So I did quite a bit of civil litigation, quite a lot of family, which gave me lots of experience going to court. And then I did a bit of commercial real estate and a token bit of resi conveyancing, where I did my friend's conveyancing. And then I prayed years down the line that they did own, when they came to sell, that they did own the house that they actually thought they owned.
Could you imagine? Sorry about that.
Sorry, guys. Thankfully, all okay. I kind of stick to litigation, I think.
Perfect.
Mine was predictably trust and estates was one of them. And then matrimonial, and then a bit of sort of real estate, residential stuff.
Okay.
I don't know that I chose all of them, but
just kind of get placed.
Yeah.
Bro. And obviously we've touched on the fact that you're new a couple times now, but I'm just intrigued to sort of speak a bit more about first impressions of Ashfords. And I know you said it's come across as very open and sort of communicative, but anything else that you feel is important?
I think it feels like a really friendly place to work, and it feels like the business really does put their people in the centre. Because lots of law firms say, you know, this is our main asset, our people, and it is, but there does seem to be a really good culture in terms of looking after people, making sure the right things are done, and as Kerry was saying, leading by example. It's very positive.
Brilliant. No, that's great to hear. We've also given you the kind of heads up that I'm going to be asking you about a highlight and a horror from your careers. So I think now is the time, if you'd be happy to share.
I feel like this is the point in an interview where you're always asking somebody, tell me a time when you made a mistake. Yeah, it's that kind of question, isn't it?
And we do want to know the mistake.
Oh, do you want me to go first?
Up to you. I know.
So my kind of trainee horror story, it's not really a horror story, but the kind of moment that has never left me as a litigator, because it just kind of, I remember that kind of feeling of dread. I was in court. When I sat outside court, I'd had a few hearings in chambers that I'd been dealing with. I was kind of done for the day, and I was just sat there packing up my things outside, and this chap and a police officer walked past in handcuffs, and I wasn't really paying too much attention, to be honest. Just kind of, again, packing my things away, not minding my own business, getting ready to go back. It was a Friday afternoon. Anyhow, the court usher then comes to me and says, "Oh, Miss Morgan, I think the judge would like to see you, because I think the person that's just been taken in was on the other side of one of your cases last week." I said, "Oh, okay. Can you tell me a bit more about it?" And so he did. And I said, maybe I should get my supervisor to come along, because what turned out that I secured an order in a previous case that came with a power of arrest if it was breached. And so the particular order was breached by this individual, and he'd been picked up by the police. The district judge that was sitting was long since retired now, but he was very, very old school. When I said to the usher, you know, maybe I should get my supervisor. This sounds pretty serious. He said, "Well, I'll relay it to the district judge, and I'll remind the district judge that you are only a trainee." District judge didn't give a hoot that I was only still a trainee, and was like, "No, I'd like Miss Morgan to come in now, please," because quite clearly he decided what he was going to do with this individual, and it didn't really much matter what came out of my mouth. Ultimately, he'd made his decision, which was that this person had to spend the weekend at His Majesty's pleasure. So, but I remember going into court thinking, I have got not a Scooby-Doo. What I'm going to say, I don't really know. This is completely new territory for me here, dealing with committal proceedings. Had to remind the judge that I didn't technically have rights of audience to say very much, but he was dispensing with all of that and decided that he was going to make the decision he wanted to make. So,
talk about a tough day.
I know, tough day in court, hey?
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you spoke to your supervisor after that, did they have anything to say in terms of...
Well, they knew the particular district judge that I'd been before, so I don't think they were particularly surprised that was the decision, and they were really supportive and said, you know, well done. You know, it sounds like you handled it in the best ways you possibly could. But it is a horror story that I have recounted several times to future trainers.
But you're glad it was a weekend then.
Glad it was a weekend. Yeah, the poor chap who had to stay in wasn't glad it was a weekend, having to stay there till Monday. But yeah, no, I was glad it was a weekend.
Oh gosh.
Mine actually my personal one is also another court one. It was during my matrimonial seat, and I'd gone off to some court. I think it was just for an interim directions hearing, something like that. And it all kicked off. And I didn't know what to do or what was happening. And the person the other side didn't have a lawyer and just kept, I think they'd been asked to leave at some point because they were sort of shouting a lot. And they then broke back into the courtroom, ran down to the middle. I've put bombs under all of your cars. I mean, they hadn't, but it was gosh. That was an experience.
That's not something you forget. No, I'm not surprised.
No, I haven't forgotten that one. My highlight was a matrimonial one too.
Okay,
so it was all quite balanced. But
what was the highlight?
The firm I was working for had some really interesting matrimonial. Well, it was actually a family case. It was to do with family law, and I ended up supporting a case that went through the Court of Appeal and one of the last ones in the House of Lords. And I had this access all area pass, and I'd wave to the tourists as they were all queuing.
That's really cool.
It was brilliant. Really, really good.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow.
It's quite unusual for us to be able to talk about highlights too much now in our world, I think, isn't it? Because everything is so confidential.
Yeah.
It's but I think the highlights for me have got a bit. There isn't one particular case or scenario. I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier, kind of that access to people's lives, dealing with people when they're particularly vulnerable. And, kind of that unique perspective you see. Some things you wish you hadn't seen, but, it is definitely interesting.
I seem to have a habit of having trainees who, when they go to properties, when someone's died, they seem to always find guns.
And this is a habit.
It does seem to be. Different trainees, it's a reoccurring theme in my files, and I don't know why. The really intriguing thing is that the instinct is almost always to collect the gun and bring it back to the office. And I actually do now say to trainees when they're going on home visits to probate properties, if you find a gun, leave it there, because they all want to bring it back, and I never know why or what they think they're going to do with it. And I'm pretty sure it's a criminal offence to be driving around with a gun or, on a train with a gun. Especially if you don't have a license.
No, you just think, why would you?
Don't know. I think it's because it's a risk, so they don't want to leave it there, which is completely understandable. But equally, I'm not sure what our insurers would say.
No, potentially a bigger risk bringing it along.
I think so.
Brings a whole new perspective to putting everything in a locked case, doesn't it? Really?
It does. It does.
My goodness.
That's brilliant.
It is. Absolutely. Okay, perfect. And just sort of closing out, like to speak a bit about sort of any advice that you have for future trainees. And Kerry, you're obviously in a very unique position as well of being our, I guess, ex-training principal, you could call it now. So you're kind of experienced in being on the forefront with the trainee program. So keen to hear about any kind of advice that you may have.
Yeah, I mean, I loved being training principal. I did. It was of all of the hats that I've worn in the firm, actually, it was really the most rewarding. Laura, now you are in incredible hands with Laura. She is
brilliant,
amazing training principal, absolutely amazing. And it was really important actually that when I handed that role over, that it was going to be somebody who really cared about it and actually was truly invested, and she absolutely is, which is fantastic. So lucky trainees, you've got Laura. But in terms of my advice to trainees, I think it's a marathon, not a sprint, in terms of your training contract. We touched on even those seats that actually you don't necessarily think are going to be for you, or areas that you might ultimately want to qualify. Remember, there's something to be taken from each and every one of those. And I also share I think we had a little bit of a laugh about, trainees who end up qualifying in departments that they never thought. And the amount of times that's happened, you seat move time and you put somebody in a department and think, I didn't want to do that department. But because as training principal and it's taking a step back, you can see that actually somebody might be really well suited to a particular department and they've just not actually identified it themselves. So take those opportunities. I think be open-minded. I think the other thing I think that takes a good trainee to a great trainee is that person who takes ownership of tasks and doesn't just get so focused on the individual tasks that they're being asked to deliver, but actually they make sure that if they've been asked to draft a letter of advice, for example, and they've sent it to their supervisor, that they're following up with that supervisor to make sure that the advice has been sent out, or if it's not been sent out, what else can they do to help support that piece of work ending up in its ultimate destination. I think those are the trainees that really do fly. But I think over and above, for me, it's being open-minded.
Similar. I think we probably touched on this earlier as well, but asking questions, really thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Why is it important? Is this the way to approach it? Is there another way? Because sometimes, with a fresh pair of eyes, you might think, why are we doing it like this? What about this? And voicing those things, that's really helpful. And work with as many people as you can, because you learn so much from that. And it might be, I don't want to work like that. Like, how this person approaches things is not the lawyer I want to be, but I really love how that person does this and this person, and sort of pull all of those strands together so that you become the lawyer that you want to be.
It's kind of taking the best bits of everybody. I think that's you're in a unique position as a trainee, aren't you? To kind of
to watch and to see a lot as a trainee.
And why Ashfords? Why should a trainee a future trainee, look to apply for a firm like Ashfords?
I was saying earlier that I've been surprised in a good way at how much autonomy is given to our trainees. Yeah. And I think they're really in an environment where they can thrive here. They're given those opportunities and they're supported. They're not thrown in the deep end and abandoned, because that's the other risk with having, too much autonomy. It seems to be done in a really structured and in a way where people are looked after but can develop.
Yeah, and I think, apart from the fact that, we have great retention rates, obviously, because
brilliant retention rates.
Because that's embedded in our trainee recruitment strategy, though, because when we're recruiting our trainees, we are looking for that Ashfords trainee, and we want somebody who's going to be a great fit with us for the long term, not just for a period of their training contract. So that runs through everything we do. And it's as much about the trainee choosing the right firm for them as us choosing the right trainees for us, isn't it, really? We want people to do well. And I think that comes across in everything we do and how trainees are treated. So I think that's another really great reason why they'd want to choose us. But, and also the opportunities that they get with the different departments and the different work areas we do. We have some great clients and some great work out there. And sometimes until you get to, peek behind the curtain at Ashfords, you might not necessarily appreciate actually all that we do and the types of work that we do. So coming to a firm like ours, where you'll get that balance of, like Emma says, of autonomy, being able to develop and grow your own individual style and your own individual career, but you're also getting that in a supportive environment where there's a real broad spectrum of different areas for you to experience during that kind of 2-year training contract.
That's perfect. I think that's all that we have for today, but thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.